This is the daf of Nun Vav, and we say it's dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim. That's all for this Yom and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. So we're going to start on Nun Vav Amid Aleph, 5 lines from the top. It says in our Mishnah, it only becomes Yayin Nesach ad sheyere labor, until once it goes down into the cistern, then it is Yayin Nesach. But until it's in the cistern at the bottom, it's not Yayin Nesach. So again, there's three main parts to the process of the wine. There's a place where you press it. That's called the got. Then it goes through a tzinor, a pipe, where basically it filters out a lot of the stuff you don't want. And then it goes down into a bore, into this cistern, where it, I guess, ferments and turns into the wine that we all know about. So our Mishnah now says, so the Brisa says, Vatanan, but we learned in the Mishnah, Maestros, to understand. So we want to know, when does it become Yayin Netzach? And we also know, when does it become prohibited to eat from until you take Meiser, because it's Tevel. So it says Yayin Mishe Yikbeh, that when does wine become obligated to be tithed? When is considered the final use of it? That is Mishe Yikbeh. Look at Rashi. Avik-mar melachol in your Meiser. So once it has Yikbeh, then we say it's required to be tithed, and therefore you're not allowed to drink from it. You're not allowed to drink from it at all. So even arai. So what is sheyikbeh? Rashi says lashon of staf, of floating. Kamo kapot tahoma il mesechas sukkah. That when the wine begins to rest in the cistern, some stuff floats to the top, the stuff that you don't want, that you're going to have to skim off. So once that comes up to the top, then we know that the wine is done. And for Meiser. So that's when it's Yayin Nesach. So we see Yayin Nesach is only when when the wine floats to the top, not when it goes into the cistern. So the Gemara says, Lokash, it's not a contradiction. Ha Rabbi Akiva, ha Rabbanan. One is Rabbi Akiva, one is the Rabbanan. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Yayin Mishayarad Labor, that according to the Rabbanan, when does it become Yayin Nesach, or when are you obligated to be tithing it? When it goes into the cistern, that's when you're obligated to tithe it. Rabbi Akiva Omer Misha Yikbeh. So Rabbi Akiva says once it floats to the top. So our Mishnah, which says once it goes into the boards, Yayin Nesach, is like the Rabbanan of that Brisa. Ibayu Kipo de Bor or Kipo de Chavis. Oh, so when the Mishnah in Meiseros says that you're obligated in Meiser once the stuff floats to the top, is that the top of the cistern or the top of the barrel? Meaning to say there's two floatings to the top. There's first in the cistern it floats, then you transfer it to a barrel, and then it floats again to the top. So which is it? Obviously, if it's in the top of the barrel, and it can't become Yayin Nesach until it gets to the barrel, that'd be very good if you want to hire non-Jewish labor, or if you want to buy wine from idolaters. No problem then. So the Gemara says, Tashma the Tanya Yayin Mishayik Ba'afu Pisha Koet Minagat Al Yono Minatinor Vishote. So it says in the Mishnah in Maestros, it says the wine becomes obligated to be tithed Misha Yikape once it floats to the top. The Afu Pisha Kipa, and even though it was floating, Koet Minagat Al Yona, you could still take wine from the press, Uminat Sinor, or from the pipe, Vishota, and drink it without its tithing. Shmamina Kipo Debor Ka'amrina. Meaning to say, the Brisa says the Mishnah says that when is the wine obligated to be tithed? Once it floats to the top. But even though it's floated to the top of the cyst, you could still take from the press and from the pipe and drink. We see from here that we're talking about the floating to the top of the cistern, because there's nothing to do with the barrel. Shmamina Kipoy Debor Kamrina. So that's what Shmamina. So we're seeing that when you're obligated to be tithing from when it becomes floating to the top of the cistern, and that's presumably the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, that's when Yayin Nesach takes place. Whereas the Rabbanan say once it goes into the cistern, you're liable in Meiser and Yayin Nesach. Gemara says, but there's another brayso. Vatani Rav Zvid b'debei Rabbi Oshaya, but we Yayin misheyer labor v'kape. Rabbi Kiva Omar misheyishle b'chavios. That according to this other brayso, that when does the Meiser take place? When are you obligated to tithe it? Only when it's in the barrel. Then we're going to say that that's when you're obligated to tithe, which is obviously much later than the cistern. So why would we say Rabbi Akiva is when it's in the cistern? It's when it's in the barrels. So so the Gemara says, okay, that's how we have to explain the first brayso. So now we've explained that the first brayso we have to amend, and we read that the first brayso is that the rabbis say, when are you obligated in Yayin in Meiser? When it floats to the top of the cistern. And Rabbi Akiva says when it floats to the top, when it goes into the barrels. So if that's the case, we now have a problem, because according to our reading now of the Brisa, that the Mishnah is telling us that the Machokes about Meiser is when it's in either the rising to the top of the cistern or going into the barrels. But our Mishnah here had said that it's from when it goes into the cistern, even you're obligated in Yayin Nesach, even before rises to the top. Do you want to say it's a three-way machokas that our Mishnah says you're chayiv in Yayin Nesach once it goes into the cistern, and the Rabbanan and Maestros say it's once it floats, the dregs float to the top of the cistern, and Rabbi Akiva says once it goes into the barrel. You want to say it's a three-way machokas? The Gemara says no. No, it's a two-way machokas. That's only about Maestros, but about Yayin Nesach, the rabbis are even more strict, and they say there you're chayiv in Yayin Nesach not once it floats to the top of the cistern, but once it goes into the cistern. And it doesn't tell us what Rabbi Akiva would say there if he's also stricter, but presumably he is, because it doesn't say his position by Yayin Nesach. Rava delo shanila, and according to Rava, who says that there's no distinction. Mukim wa ketlas tanai. And according to Rava, we saw earlier, he wasn't bothered by this. We must say that there's three tanaim according to Rava. So now we have a very interesting. We'll get to that in a moment. So the Gemara says, "Mashav avor asar v'ashar," that the wine goes down into the cistern. Everything in the cistern is prohibited, and the rest, the wine that's still up in the press, is permitted. So Gemara says, when do we say that the wine in the cistern is prohibited, but the wine in the press is permitted? That's only where it's only a case the gargutani is basically this large basket that's attached to the pipe that brings the wine from the press to the pit. And when the wine passes through it, it filters out the stuff you don't want in the wine. And if after the filter they take it out and they don't put it back, then the wine in the press does not become prohibited. But if you take this thing out, which had caught the wine and the wine had touched all the other stuff you don't want, if you put it back in the press, then the whole press is going to be prohibited, because there are drops of wine in this gargutani that get mixed with the wine in the press, and they prohibit it. So the Gemara says, well, how did the gargutani itself become prohibited? Gargutani gufa b'maika mitzvah. How did the press itself become prohibited? The Gemara says, benitzuk, because we have this idea that if you have a stream, the stream is pouring down. You have this also with kashrus. It's a very big inyan with kashrus. You pour a stream, and the stream is coming from a pot on top, from, let's say, a tea kettle. It goes to the bottom. The stream connects it. So we see from here, with respect to Yayin Nesach, that since there's a stream flowing down, and the gargutani is connected to the cistern below, the cistern is making the gargutani itself into Yayin Nesach, and then the Yayin Nes, and then the gargutani, when it's mixed with the press, makes a Yayin Nesach. Tani Rab Chia, like Rab Chia taught, in the Bryce, we're going to get to this, God willing, that's just Hashem Yitzbarach and Daf Ayam base, that if a Jew pours wine into a utensil of a Nachri, we say there that the wine is going to be prohibited, even though he's pouring it, because we say shepechasto. So basically, we're saying no, it's not because of nitzach, it's because of something else. We're saying that it's prohibited because of shepechasto tzolchiso, because the wine that was in the utensil of the non-Jew went up and it touched the lid of what was pouring. And so that's what we're going to say here. It's not that it was connected by the stream. It went up through the overflow, actually went and touched it. You got a question, Harold? So now we see the following case. There was a child, the Tana Avodas Kochavim B'Shishani. When he was 6 years old, he studied Mesechas Avodas Kochavim. They asked the question, so why do we have to know how old the child is? Because there are certain things in life that are so clear, right and wrong, even a child knows what's right and what's wrong. And so therefore, Hilchos Avodah Zarah, even the child knows. So they come and they ask the child this question. He's 6 years old. Can you press the grapes with the idolater in the press? He said, yeah, you could do it. And you don't have to be concerned because it's the press and it's not Yayin Netzach. So but why aren't we concerned that while there's liquid in the press, he's doing the libation? No, the tzayrani luliyade. You tied up his hand, so it's not a problem. But he could do yayin netzach with his foot. Nah, the little kid said, "What are you talking about? Nisoch the regel lochmei nisoch. That's not yayin netzach. You don't have to be concerned about that." Okay, so we'll stop here. God willing, this is tomorrow. This is tomorrow's daf, so we won't meet again in the morning, tonight or tomorrow morning. I'll put it up there now. Shekoyach to everybody.
Thank you. Safe.